Welcome to everybody. I'm Suzanne Carter. I work for the Adaptation Research Alliance based at South North in Cape Town, where I'm based. And today's session is about experiences in bridging research to action. This is one of the sort of key missions of the Adaptation Research Alliance, and we will be touching on some examples of how we're managing to make that happen, which is quite exciting. The ARA has been going for about 18 months now. Since its launch at COP26. And in the agenda, you'll see here a brief summary. I'm giving you the welcome right now, and this will be followed by some highlights of the ARA's first year, Adaptation Research Alliance's first year, by our Head of Secretariat, Jessie DeMaria-Kinney. Then I'm going to be showing you a video, which is hot off the press. It was just submitted last week, Monday, to the Global Stocktake submissions. And this is really capturing views from the ground about how local adaptation can be counted towards the global stocktake. So I hope you will all find this first screening of this submission very interesting. It's about a 7 minutes long video. Then we will go over to Sydney, who's going to give us an update on the second round of Adaptation Research for Adaptation Research Alliance's Grassroots Action Research microgrants. And those microgrants, we had a first round last year. This will be the second round. So she'll share some learning from the first round and looking ahead at what's going to be happening with the second round. And then we will go to a discussion between myself and Alejandro about the ARA co-creation approaches and the different themes. There's 4 themes, and we're looking to find interested parties to join us on this journey of co-creation. And then we'll end off with some Q&A. If we don't need the full time, we won't need to go on to the end. And then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks from Jessie. Okay, let's see, just want to quickly check from the chat. Yep, no, that's just everyone introducing themselves. That's great. For those of you who might not have heard of the Adaptation Research Alliance, the ARA is a global coalition that's made up of researchers, funders, policymakers, development bodies, community-based organizations. So what brings all of these different actors together? Well, we're all committed to action research for adaptation that supports climate-resilient futures. And this core mission that we all sort of are working towards, everyone contributes in different ways, but that's what binds this alliance of organizations together. So the ARA's mission is to accelerate and scale investments in action-oriented research in developing countries that addresses the knowledge needs for adaptation and resilience of the most vulnerable. So these co-creation processes that I mentioned, that we'll go into a bit more detail later, are one of the key vehicles that we're going to be using to accelerate and scale new program designs that will attract new funders and really kickstart the scale of investments in adaptation and resilience research. The other part of the ARA mission is to build capacity at all stages, from research to action, and to strengthen research implementation linkages and to promote greater learning. So we have quite a lot of activities that are focused on that side of things, where it's all about sharing what our members' experiences have been, what they've learned from those, and helping others to move in the same direction. So we really see this as a community of peers that are all supporting each other in this complex challenge. And one of the founding principles, one of the founding things that we did in the beginning stages to galvanize this alliance was to develop 6 principles about adaptation research for impact that really speak to what everyone who's an Adaptation Research Alliance member is committed to doing. So these are the 6 here. I'll quickly just run through them for those who might have not have seen them before, but everyone is committed so that research is needs-driven, solutions-oriented, and leads to a positive impact. The research is transdisciplinary and co-produced with users, very important. That the research emphasizes societal impact, that it builds capacity and empowers actors for the long term, that the research processes address structural inequalities that have led to increased vulnerability, so not just working at the surface, but looking at some of the deeper causes, and to take a learning while doing approach that will enable action to occur while we're learning. All right, I'm going to hand over then to Jessie, who's going to give you some of the highlights from ARA's first year. Oh, last slide, sorry, I missed this. For those you might who want to know, these are the sort of some of the organizations. I think I touched on this in my first slide, but quite a breadth of organizations. And just to maybe share a few little points, but The number of research institutions and NGOs is about even in our alliance. So it's about 35% for each of those. We have a small group of funders. We have a small group on the private sector and social enterprises side, a few governments representative, and a few think tanks as well. So it's quite a breadth of different kinds of members that have joined this alliance. Okay, sorry, now really handing over to Jesse. Sorry about that.
Great. Thank you very much, Suzanne. And hello to everyone. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's really a pleasure to be here today at the Gobeshona conference. As Suzanne said, I'll take you through some of the key activities from the ARA's first full year following our launch at COP26, working up through COP27 and moving on to today where we are. Also, maybe just before I go in, I would just like to say, kind of on a more personal note, that as head of secretariat of the Adaptation Research Alliance, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to work with such an amazing secretariat team, many of who you'll hear from today. But of course, as well as working very closely with our host, South North, and these members that Suzanne just mentioned here. And as you can see on the screen in front of you, we have 180 members now. These members, as Suzanne said, are made up of a really diverse array of organizations, from international organizations, UNEP and UNDP, also large global organizations, NGOs like World Resource Institute, down to some of the local NGOs and smaller organizations who we also, who are represented in our membership, but also feed into the ARA microgrants, as you'll see on that second point. So I'll start speaking to that. But the ARA microgrants last year, as you can see, we had 25 microgrants, and these microgrants were really designed to identify burning issues on the ground. So we had 25 grants that were £10,000 each, and these went out to organizations that are really to galvanize and start the process of co-creation, of working with the unusual suspects, or kind of creating radical collaborations around a burning issue on the ground in where they're seeing these climate impacts. So this was something that we carried out last year. I won't go into more detail on the microgrants themselves, because as Suzanne mentioned, you'll be hearing more about them later today. But we have launched the second round of microgrants, and you'll hear much more about that. Moving across on some of the other highlights here, we have, you see, 4 co-creation spaces. And again, we will touch on this a bit more, but I will say that we announced at COP27 4 co-creation spaces across 4 thematic areas. The first of these thematic areas was nature-based solutions for equitable climate resilience. And this has been a process that we are coming near the finalization of this, working together with UK ARA and NERC and the UK FCDO. We've been scoping the design of a potential new international collaborative research program. And this has also been done in collaboration with the University of Cape Town's Climate System Analysis Group, or CSAG, and Loughborough University based in the UK. And in this case, CSAG has been really leading on the preparation of workshops, multi-actor workshops, virtual workshops, and Loughborough University leading on a desk-based review looking at what are these kind of critical issues within nature-based solutions, and particularly focusing on equitable climate resilience. So we're coming to a close on that, or nearing it. The next co-creation space is smallholder agriculture, and this we're working on with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who's really supporting a co-creation process that's aimed at ensuring that local knowledge and voices inform the strategic, the scientific, and also the action direction of philanthropic investments. And this is something we're about to kick off a desk-based review to really contextualize what it is that we need to be moving forward with this co-creation process. The third area is looking at least developed country or LDC capacity for national adaptation actions. We've just recently posted also the opportunity here to design and deliver this co-creation process in coordination with the diverse stakeholders who will come together. And in this process on the LDC capacity for national adaptation actions, we're working with the LDC University Consortium on Climate Change, or the LUC, which of course ECAD, the Gobeshona host, is a member of the LUC, and also with UNDP, another ARA member. And we're looking to really facilitate the preparation, the use, and the strengthening of national scientific and technical capacities, and bringing those national capacities into informing national adaptation actions and plans. And then the last area, which we'll also get into a bit more conversation here, is looking at urban resilience. In this process, we're working with Aditya and Alex, who we have with us today, to support the facilitation of this process that will elicit some key challenges in urban resilience. And we'll be working with, again, a broad spectrum of stakeholders here, and then narrow down potential opportunities little by little to ideally, again, develop a new program. And the last icon you see here is one new website. So hopefully you can go visit that, which is www.adaptationresearchalliance.org if you haven't already seen that. But that new website has also a members area for the ARA members, which we just launched, I believe it was a week ago, maybe two. And also a ARA Slack workspace to really facilitate knowledge exchange and information exchange amongst members, and also within the microgrants and our micrograntees. So moving on, and apologies if I'm moving quickly, but there's a lot to cover of the past year and some months. But if we look down below on the left, we can see the tracking, learning, and sharing. And our tracking, learning, and sharing activities brought together members in a very collaborative process to really exchange the evidence from practice, the empirical evidence, as well as on new ideas on how to operationalize the adaptation research for impact principles that Suzanne just shared with you, and also how to work towards achieving the ARA outcomes that are outlined in the theory of change. And within this tracking, learning, and sharing activities, the members shared experiences and shared information and experiences on understanding climate risk on the one hand, and that was in kind of two learning journeys that brought together members while also strengthening these networks and relationships. And a very similar process was also in bridging adaptation, action, and research. And I even see some people on today's conference who has actually been a part of this process. So thank you all for your contributions there. Moving across, we have the global stocktake, which is a part of our UNFCCC engagement. As Suzanne said, also you'll be able to see the video here in just a moment, but we also, behind this video comes several submissions that were really a participatory process, eliciting some of these challenges and what are the needs from a wide range of actors actually delivering adaptation actions on the ground. So, what are those gaps? What are those challenges? This information was compiled and brought into several submissions to the Global Stocktake on adaptation, and also turned into a poster to make that information a bit more accessible and intelligible. And then we've moved forward with a video that's new, and you'll see in just a moment. And the last part here on this slide in this global UNFCCC engagement was looking at the global goal on adaptation. And here the ARA and the Climate Development Knowledge Network, or CDKN, produced a video that was sharing, again, the on-the-ground views of how local action can be counted in the global stocktake and as a part of the global goal process. Next slide, please. So those are some of the activities that we carried out last year. And now if we look at this next slide here, this is some of the areas that the ARA has actually been able to influence through some of the activities and the actions that we carried out. The first, as you can see before us, was the CLARE program, integrated the principles. And the CLARE is the Climate Adaptation Resilience Initiative, which is a large program run by IDRC, the International Development Research Center in Canada, and UKFCDO. And the CLARE program, and there are three thematic areas, and those three areas are understanding climate risk, also risk-informed early action, and then developing in a changing climate. Those three thematic areas of the CLARE program the principles are integrated into the overall CLARE program. So those principles ideally are reflected in each of those three thematic areas, and of course in the projects that will be selected to deliver on the CLARE initiative. Another area that we've contributed to was the consultative process, and the consultative process that contributed to a call on global health. And this was actually with the National Institute for Health and Care Research. And they had their 5th Research and Innovation for Global Health and Transformation call. The ARA's consultative process on global health that looked at climate resilient health systems and what were the needs and the opportunities there helped inform the development of this NIHR call. And similarly, some of the activities that we had carried out with the microgrants in terms of learning for how we delivered the microgrants, as well as the work on the principles, helped inform the BASE initiative, which is the Building Approaches to Fund Local Solutions with Climate Evidence, which is being led by Fundación Avina. Again, another ARA member based in Argentina. So these are a couple of the things that some of our previous processes helped to plug in. One of the other areas of influence has been the microgrants that I mentioned from year one. We hope to see this influence expand next year as the grant amount will increase and also the grant implementation period will increase. But really, when we talk about influence here, it's not just identifying the burning issues, it's also being able to bring together these new partnerships, new collaborations, and at least get some of these started before contributing to hopefully broader adaptation actions that can emerge from some of these collaborations that were kind of catalyzed by the microgrants. And then the last point that you can see here is the ARA saw the launch of funds at COP26, and these are three larger funds. One is a Global Innovation Fund, the GSMA, and then the FCDO, and all three of those were funds that were launched from a large FCDO investment, as well as pledges from the Canadian government. We've also had some funding from Australia as well. So these are kind of the main areas over the past year that we can say we've seen the ARA's influence in some of the activities that have actually started to materialize. We hope to see many more coming up along this year. And if I can just move on to the next slide to show a bit more about this year, kind of what we're working on now and where we're headed, I guess. But first is to say that we have been working on the ARA website, as I mentioned, the members area. This is really an exciting opportunity for us because it really allows us to bring together the members themselves, have the members share information and link up together directly. So just on that, I'd also like to thank the Australian Centre for International Agriculture Research, or ACIR, for their support in developing the ARA website and the members area, which is a part also of our activity area of tracking, learning, and sharing. Another area, here's ARA 60 Minutes, and this is a space that we have on a monthly basis for members, and the members come together to actually share their own experiences and their own practices, their projects, what they're working on. And so we've had 11 of those sessions with nearly 400 participants in total. And we also had one special edition in April of last year on Claire, which again helped support this process that was being carried out by IDRC and UKFCDO. And also a feedback session on the IPCC Africa report in last June. Maybe moving on here to the governance working group. What we have done here is, again, seeing how the ARA is a member-led initiative, we also want the members to be drivers of much of our work. So as we had a previously approved governance framework for the ARA, or governance structure, in the plenary meeting of January 2022, the members identified and agreed to the need for a governance working group. And so we actually brought together a diverse group of members to help really flesh out this approved governance structure. And the aim of the working group was to identify some of these issues and some of the, I guess, the operational areas where we need to come up with solutions to ensure an effective governance of the Alliance, which at 180 members and the plenary being the highest governance body, clearly there's a whole lot to work through there and be able to engage in effective governance processes. And this process is coming to an end. So hopefully soon we'll be going to the steering board and the next plenary to actually be able to share more information on what's happening to finalize the governance framework of the Alliance overall. As I mentioned before, we have UNFCCC engagement, and this is something that working on the global stocktake and also the global goal is something that this year we will be following those processes closely, and when opportunities arise, we'll aim to engage again in those processes as we're able to and where needed. And again, this is quite often us working with our members to bring together those views from the ground of those actually experiencing the impacts of climate change and developing the adaptation solutions themselves. So seeing kind of what are those issues that can be brought up to these global conversations and the UNFCCC negotiations. And then the last point here is, one of the key areas of the Alliance is actually resource mobilization and delivery. And so here you can see the funders roundtable, and we will be holding an initial funders roundtable to bring together bilateral funders, philanthropic funders, and private sector funders to really gather insights and suggestions on how to enhance the scale of some of the ARA's key initiatives and expand the range of activities. And this is something that we see core to the ARA's mission. And of course, it's something that we want to do is link up diverse types of funders and funding mechanisms, and also to strengthen the research planning and cooperation as a part of this funders roundtable. And I believe that is all for me for this overview of the ARA. And this is just some of the things that we've been working on for the past year and some of the other activities moving forward. You'll be hearing much more about the microgrants, and you'll see this GST Global Stocktake video here in just a moment. So thank you, Suzanne.
Sorry, I lost my ability to unmute for a second there. I'm just going to be quickly lining up the video for you, but while I'm getting it, just to say that this video was done in collaboration with our colleagues at the Climate and Development Knowledge Network, and it really has been aimed at sharing an on-the-ground perspective with a lot of the work that's been happening on the global goal being and the global stocktake being more high level. This was really intended to try and share a more sorry, this is really not helping me with these multiple screens. Here we go. I got it back. To be able to share a more on the ground perspective. Right, I think I am able to share this now. Share sound. Okay. Let's go full screen. Sorry, everyone. You will enjoy this video. And yes, as I said, hot off the press, and please put in the chat any thoughts or comments you might have on it.
Making local action count in the global goal on adaptation is important because adaptation is fundamentally different from mitigation. For mitigation, we have a clear goal, which is measurable, that is to keep temperatures down to 1.5 degrees centigrade or lower for the world. Adaptation is different in the sense that it is fundamentally different for different countries, populations, contexts, and needs to be measured differently across capacities, vulnerabilities, agencies, and transformations across these various geographies.
We need to change that divide or barrier where community data sometimes is questioned to say, is this really data that can be used because it was not collected by maybe, say, Professor so-and-so.
The systematic measurement of the adaptation, successes and failures are not happening. Particularly, we need the action research, particularly, data collecting the local knowledges also, the blending of the local knowledges and the science-based knowledges, science and technology together.
Well-being goes beyond economic growth or economic income, and therefore needs to take into account various aspects of a human life. Human beings are not just economic beings who depend on incomes, but are dependent on trust and communities and association with place and identity and cultures and a lot more health, education, a lot more that's comparable, but also and tangible, but also intangible in terms of the richness of life that people live. And adaptation needs to be measured in all these aspects.
The process of co-creating, locally led adaptation matrices is very important, working together with the communities to identify what are the most important issues, what are the factors, what do they want to see as, successful adaptation.
Young people, they have what they call the no-use TV, and they go out there and they collect stories about the challenges in their communities, about the solutions, because often we only hear of the negative side of what's happening in informal settlements, but they also gather the information about the positives that are happening within their communities.
So we are looking at mapping. We are looking at data collection with that climate. So initially we used to look at how many communities are actually in a threat of evictions, yeah, by land grabbers, by the city, by roads construction. But now we are also looking at how many communities are actually vulnerable to climate change phenomena, how many are in the river riparian. So we are doing all that risk mapping through the data we collect, and probably somebody coming to evaluate, to assess. There are things that you cannot see, but there are things for us we are able to measure. We were from this point last year when it rained, actually 30 houses were washed away by the river. But this year, from the efforts that we are able to do, the interventions, actually this year, there is no house which has been washed by the floods.
A lot of the assessment frameworks are project-driven. They are designed by projects based on the expected outputs that these projects want to deliver. But certainly, this leaves out a lot of aspirations that the communities have in terms of what do they consider successful adaptation? What do they consider as important in terms of intervention? But I think that one of the key contributions that the Global Goal on Adaptation makes to local-led adaptation is by beginning to set some targets and some frameworks that can help to consolidate local actions and help to inform some of the aspirations at the local level.
Thanks, everyone. Just going to go back to the PowerPoint.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I request you to take your seats, please, so that we could formally join?
If you wouldn't mind adding what comments you have on the video in the chat. I'm afraid because of the nature of the webinar format, we're not able to take views from the floor as such for speaking, but we can get your views in the chat, and it'd be great to hear what you thought of the video. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Sydney, who's going to be talking a bit about the microgrants and the things that have been, exciting things that have been happening there. So Sydney, over to you, and apologies for the rough transition.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. Really enjoyed watching that video. I think it's the first time I've seen it as well. To move on, we are really excited to be launching the Grassroots Action Research microgrants. As Suzanne said, this is the second round of microgrants, and we will be awarding £15,000 to 30 grantees in this round. And the purpose of the microgrants is to unearth ideas, knowledge, and opportunities to adapt to climate change in the Global South. And we really encourage transdisciplinary collaborations involving both research and action, incorporating gender and social inclusion. So really feeds off the video that you've just seen. We want the ideas to also have input from local individuals, institutions who collaborate, create transdisciplinary collaborations with researchers, funders, and other stakeholders. Next slide, please, Suzanne. So just before we go more into what's going to happen in this round, we continued the microgrants because some key learnings which are emerging from a review which we're currently undertaking of the first round of microgrants showed that this kind of granting did successfully enable engagement with those who are most marginalised to feed into solutions-oriented research, and that they strengthened relationships and identified areas of synergy amongst key actors. It also showed that action stakeholder engagement in the research process is valuable and wanted by communities affected by climate change. There were needs both for action voices and for research voices to collaborate to find a common understanding of the issues being faced and ways forward. And that microgrants have the potential to trigger new opportunities on a wider scale for grantees. So we're very pleased with these emerging findings, particularly with the first one, in that those who are most marginalised, or those who maybe don't often have a voice to input into processes or collaborations which influence how we adapt to climate change, to actually be involved in the process and to be heard and incorporated. Next slide, please. And some feedback from a couple of grantees from the previous round as well. From Association Popnoj, they said the interest has been aroused and that there's now political willingness and it's possible to advance research and the co-creation of proposals, plans and coordinated actions. So for them, the microgrants was a valuable kickstart onto something bigger, including getting, political willingness, as they said, motivation, and to move forward in the necessary collaborations to actually be able to make progress. And also from Kasagana, they said the biggest success was the range of stakeholders that they were able to reach and the passion with which issues were discussed and how different interests were managed, and that consultations enabled the voice and opinions of minority or often neglected stakeholders in coastal development and management to be heard. So both of these was, really promising feedback in terms of what the microgrants were able to catalyse, including strengthened collaborations, including voices that aren't often included, and the range of stakeholders that can come together to identify what the issue is that's being faced and how to move forward. Next slide, please. So moving back to this round of microgrants, this timeline just shows something of what to expect. We called out for applications in October last year. We also announced that we were calling out for applications at COP27. And we since then have completed reviewing the applications, and we had 14 reviewers review them, and we have come to an agreement on the final 30 that will be granted. We are in the process of communicating with them and setting up contracts and sorting out the first invoice. So we won't actually announce the names of the organisations until May, so that we can make sure that we can work with everyone to get them contracted successfully. From May, they'll then have until the end of the year, until the end of December, to carry out their activities. And in this round, we're investing a lot more in learning and monitoring and evaluation of the grantees so that we can learn from them, and also so that there's increased learning between grantees themselves as well. So we're very pleased about that. And we've also given a lot more time to supporting setting up contracts and to paying invoices following feedback from the previous round where more support and time was needed for these things. And we've separated the time to set up contracting from the time that they have to actually implement activities so that we can make sure everyone has the time necessary to actually make headway, build the relationships and do the work that needs to be done so that they can benefit as much as possible from the grant. Next slide, please. So going back to the review process just a little bit, as it is something that we've recently completed, there was an external review which was facilitated by the Secretariat, and we had 14 expert reviewers from across the regions that we received applications in. We did have a particular focus in this, in the evaluation on gender and social inclusion, which speaks to the adaptation research for impact principle, which Suzanne referred to earlier, number 5. This is research processes address structural inequalities that lead to increased vulnerability and reduced adaptive capacity of those at risk, which looks at how can research address the root cause of risk. And the reason that we did this really is because the nature of the grant means that it calls for an awareness and integration of the relevant demographics or intersections, by which I mean gender, race or job, class, caste, whatever is important in that context. The nature of the grant really calls for them to be considered in the project design and approach so that everyone can be aware of, one, the stakeholders that need to be part of finding the solution or finding or clarifying what the problem is in the first place, and two, so that the project approach makes sure that everyone is heard and included in a way which will make these micro grants a success, which we learned from the first round. Obviously, all of the other adaptation research for impact principles were also included in terms of how projects were evaluated, but we allowed grantees to decide which ones were relevant for them to include, not necessarily to include all of them if they weren't relevant, but we did request specific implementation of the gender and social inclusion principle. Next slide, please. So we received a total of 164 applications. This was double the amount of applications from the first round that we received, but we could only award 30, and we have selected 10 in Asia, 10 in Africa, and 10 in Latin America and the Caribbean. Next slide, please. And just to give you a flavour of what to expect from some of the applications that have been chosen, we've got topics including climate change in coastal areas and the impact on health of pregnant women. We've got exploring the coping mechanisms and resources available for individuals with physical disabilities to adapt to flooding, as well as identifying other resources needed. We've got raising awareness through utilising community capacity and resources to adapt to forest fires. And we've got the identification of sustainable nature-based solutions within community members and researchers to adapt to coastal flooding. So we really do have an array of applications across different themes. And we've got very strong integration of gender and social inclusion within all of the projects that have been selected. And we've got a few that are specifically focused on gender themselves as well, which we were really pleased about. So we're hugely excited to be doing this next round, and it's a really unique opportunity to make sure that local actors are involved in making sure that we understand what the issue is for adaptation in that particular area. Next slide, please. Yes, so the final selection will be announced now in May, just so that we can make sure we can support everyone to get contracted and set up before they start. But please do follow us on our website and on our YouTube account and on Twitter, as we will be posting updates about the progress of the grantees as we go, and we're very excited to move forward with them. So thank you. I'll hand back to you now, Suzanne.
Thanks so much, Sydney. So I'm going to quickly give an overview of the co-creation spaces that we've mentioned a few times now, and then hand over to Alex to explain the urban resilience one in a bit more detail. But as we've mentioned before, there's 4 themes that we have been working towards building new programs and designing new programs that can be delivered in the Global South, that will really have this, as Sydney said, this context-specific lens that will really have this co-creation approach embedded into them, and that will hopefully lead to better connections between action and research. That's the intention behind all of the work. So the 4 themes that we have here, as JC mentioned, there's the nature-based solutions for equitable climate resilience that's been supported by UK ARA and NERC. And that one is almost at its completion. It's sort of wrapping up phase now. So that's the first one that's been conducted. There's a second on smallholder agriculture that's been at the moment coordinated by my colleague Julio, who's unfortunately not able to join us today. He's luckily on leave. But that process is going to be kicking off quite soon, and there'll be actually some opportunities advertised through that you might want to look out for to help with the facilitation of that smallholder agriculture piece of work. And there'll be ongoing opportunities on that one coming up. So if this is a topic area that's of interest to you, please do look out on the Adaptation Research Alliance's website for more information. It will be coming out soon. We recently concluded appointing a facilitator for the LDC capacity strengthening piece on helping them to LDC universities better connect with their national adaptation plans and actions in the countries that they're working in. This one I've been working on to date, and with the facilitator now appointed, we will be starting to actually convene some sessions soon, which is exciting. And then, as I mentioned, Aditya and Alex are leading on the urban resilience piece of work. This one is also just getting started, so similar to the LDC one. We're quite excited about that. So we'll be convening sessions on both of the last 2, maybe even also the last 3, at both the Community-Based Adaptation Conference and at Adaptation Futures So I hope that some of you will be at those events and might be able to participate in some of our sessions there, which will be mostly sense checking sessions. There'll be other more formal workshops for longer periods, but obviously the sessions in these kind of events tend to be short. But hopefully you can at least get a flavor and be connected to what's going on. Right, I'm then going to just give you, as I said, a very quick overview of the least developed countries capacity strengthening co-creation space. This one was really born out of the idea that we know a lot of work is going on national adaptation plans, for example, that is done by international consultants. Why? Why are local researchers not being involved in this process? What do we need to do to change this up? How do we invest in local researchers to build the better connection with their national governments, to make sure that they're supporting their national governments, that the revenues for this kind of work is going within their own economy? And so that's really the rationale behind what we're trying to do with this co-creation space, is to change up that dynamic. And we think that the way to do that is to strengthen the capacity of these least developed country universities. Luckily, there is a well-known consortium of that's what's working with us on this, also involved with ICAD. And the Least Developed Universities Consortium on Climate Change has been helping us think through how this might all work. And we've also been speaking to UNDP, who's very involved with a lot of the Global Climate Fund readiness programs for NAP development, and about the challenges that they're seeing on the ground and how we change this dynamic. We're all very excited about this. And as I said, we've just appointed a facilitator who will start convening sessions to co-create this new program. And so they're really playing the role of bringing everyone together and allowing all the various ideas to bubble to the surface and help us navigate, I'm sure, lots of interesting pathways we could take. So as I mentioned, there's the sessions planned at the Community-Based Adaptation Conference in May and the Adaptation Futures in October, and there'll be other in-person meetings that will still to be confirmed. I'm going to hand over to Alex to talk a bit more about the urban resilience co-creation space.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Susan. So when we think about urban resilience, we think of a complex and wicked problem, right? So it's a problem that involves a high uncertainty in climate projections, but also in urban development pathways. So in this context, basically, traditional ways of addressing urban planning are very ineffective. They think of you need to think about linear processes that consider basically understanding the problem separately from the circles and spheres of decision making. In our urban co-creation space, we're thinking basically to bring these areas together. We're facing a problem that in the future we're going to be facing the majority of the population living in urban centers, which will be actually facing disproportionate risks, and there's very, very little amount of climate finance that are going to be basically poured in these environments. To tackle this very complicated problem, by bringing a diverse set of stakeholders from different policy circles, from different practice communities and research tradition, the urban co-creation space will actually enable reframe this problem and produce transformative solutions. ARA, in this urban resilient co-creation space, will actually facilitate this dialogue and enable basically rethinking this problem and produce solutions that are transformative. For this, we'll be actually establishing a 3-month process with the objective of actually producing that program with high potential of being funded. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks so much, Alex. One thing I forgot to mention, I remembered about the other co-creation spaces, the smallholder agriculture space. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are very keen to fund a program from that co-creation space, and that's very exciting as well. So I forgot to mention that, and I didn't want to forget. So I just quickly let you know. But as Alex mentioned, the urban resilience and the least developed countries ideas are still to be funded, still to line up a funder to sort of roll out a full implementation of these new programs that we'll be designing in the co-creation spaces. So we are looking for those who might be interested in those particular topic areas and working with them. Sorry. I'm going to now stop sharing my screen. And Alex, I know you had put together a Jamboard. So if you could put the Jamboard link into the chat, I'm going to then find the Jamboard in the web page and hopefully share that more seamlessly than my previous attempt. But basically what we're hoping to do with you all now is just a bit of a jam on what you might be interested in getting involved with on these particular co-creation spaces. So here's the link.
And also, I'm going to share a document so you can actually sign up and give your contact details if you want to be further engaged in the future.
Perfect. Okay, so the first link is for the Jamboard, which is mapping some opportunities for these co-creation spaces. And the second one is the link if you're interested to sort of sign up to get involved. Okay. All right, I'm going to attempt to do the share again. Okay, so if you would like to, you can put your ideas on here using sticky notes. Let's quickly move this around.
Well, Susan is basically setting up the platform. I'll just give you an overview of what you see in front of you. So we're suggesting 5 areas where you can actually put your ideas forward, such as different themes within urban resilience or geographical areas or organizational and networks or policy processes that the urban co-creation space should actually engage with. So it's kind of a mapping of options that you think it would be very relevant for us to be involved with.
See, a few people have joined it. So if you are having any problems with being able to add things, then let me know.
Just want to flag, it says view only. You might need to just click that so that people can edit it.
Okay, sorry about that. Leandro, if you could just change the permissions. See, Irene's hand has been raised. Can we allow Irene to speak, or can you maybe put what you wanted to say into the chat? Okay, well, while we're sorting out those logistical issues, I see that there was a question put forward by Lisa Banda about how can organizations become a member of the Adaptation Research Alliance and what are the requirements. So the membership is free. It is signing up to a set of 6 principles. That is the main requirement. You have to agree as an organization that those 6 principles are important and that you commit to working on those principles and integrating them into the work that you're doing. That's the main requirement from our side. And there's on the Adaptation Research Alliance's website, there is a link to go and express interest in. We cannot access the chat, someone's saying. I'm not sure why that is. If the ICAD colleagues might be able to help with that, I'm really sorry. So yeah, so if you go to the Adaptation Research Alliance's website, you'll be able to click on join as a new member and express your interest, and then there's a form to fill in, and it navigates you from there. And then our colleague Larisha will receive your sort of application of interest and work with you from there. No, there are plenty of members from Africa as well. That's definitely wrong. It's not just one member from Africa. I think Larisha can give me more specific numbers, but I think that Europe and Africa are about 30% each of our membership base. So there's, yeah, it's a very high. We actually have, it's one of our biggest constituencies is from Africa. Okay, so hopefully Medea is managing to help with the chat problem. Given that, though, that there seems to be a problem with people being able to access things, I am going to also copy these answers from Jesse.
I shared the Jamboard link. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, Susan. I just got in, but I shared the Jamboard link to the open chat. I hope everyone can access it now. I would request the attendees to please have a look at that link.
Ah, thank you. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that now and can feel free to add. Okay. Are there any other questions from the floor? Please feel free to type them into the Q&A. We're happy to take them as we're going at this point in the session. I've answered all the ones that were there. If anyone would like to add any more things on there, then hopefully you're able to do so. If you're having any problems, please do put in the chat. Okay, I see someone has managed to put something up there. Fantastic. So for the themes on urban resilience, some sustainable infrastructure and services delivery. Great, that's a really good idea.
I may also invite you to reflect on the areas that you think basically that are generally underfunded. What areas are experiencing the biggest gap, basically attention from donors and practitioners and policymakers?
Okay, I'm hoping everyone is managing with the technology. But if you are struggling, you can also put it into the chat and we'll transfer it for you.
You cannot? Okay. Have you Khalid, have you tried the link that Madiha has shared?
Okay, yeah, Carly, if you wouldn't mind just putting into the chat then what you want to add to the Jamboard, then we can do that for you. And apologies about that.
Mm-hmm. No, we'll be able to do that. I think we will take that.
Okay, and ICIMOD is listed as one of the organizations that we should involve. Fantastic. Yeah, already an ARA member, so that's good. And on policy process, regional collaborations between South-South and North-South learnings. Yes, that's very much also in line with where the ARA likes to operate, and it's a very good idea. So yes, this is just for the urban. If you have other ideas, please feel free to put them in the chat and I can pass this on to my other colleagues that are working on those. But yeah, the smallholder agriculture or the least developed countries are still in sort of a very active phase. The nature-based solutions one is nearing the end, so there's less ability to really do much on that one at the moment. And, yeah, as it is winding down. Alex, are there any other things about the urban resilience theme that you want to let people know about your current thinking?
Yes, we'll be very much interested as well to identify the networks, basically with the potential to influence policy processes at both national and regional level. And if you have any thoughts of what kind of networks we should be supporting, as well as what kind of support they are actually would make them have a better leverage, that would be great as well.
Okay, great. I see Lisa's put in the chat that she suggests dialogue sessions on continental or regional policy. So yeah, much more about the transboundary sort of aspect. So that's I think very interesting. And then also under the geographical, the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, cities in mountains are more vulnerable and peri-urban areas are developing. So better planning is important. Another one on networks from the chat from Kylie. She's saying that connecting people and governments at the grassroots level. Yeah, I think that would be really hoping is going to be be part of this process for sure. If there's any particular ones you think we need to be incorporating, then do please elaborate. I've got another one on open spaces, green and blue spaces. So yes, sort of the global commons always come up as sort of something, I suppose, on the urban resilience side that are very important, often contested, neglected, and can cause quite a lot of anxiety. Just transition, another suggestion for the thematic. Do you want to just elaborate a little bit more about what you mean, what you mean by the just transition? It can mean such a different thing to many different people. So if you wouldn't mind adding a little more, it would be very helpful. Thanks. A quick question from Lisa. The organizations or networks we're suggesting will be engaged or will have to be members in the alliance? Just to engage. No, our co-creation processes are not closed to just members. We are very happy to incorporate those who should be part of the conversation. If they feel the benefit of joining the Adaptation Research Alliance, then that would be encouraged, but it's not a requirement.
That actually also invites you to think about process of engagement. What would be actually the best way to engage different stakeholders for this co-production, no? For this approach where we aim to flatten power relations and open space for the knowledge of everybody.
Great. And I see, Lisa, you're suggesting there PACJA and the civil society on climate change, Southern Voices on adaptation. Okay, thank you. Those are all networks.
Thank you very much.
On the just transitions, moving towards green growth and low carbon development while maintaining social inclusivity. Okay, so that's, yeah, great. Thanks for clarifying. I think that is the more traditional way I think about it, but I think the just transitions has been used in lots of different contexts these days. So I wanted to be sure we got what you meant correct. So thank you very much. Okay. I think there's been another new one down here on the networks. Important to work with community federations, CBOs and COOPs, including local governments. Okay. Thanks all for all these very rich contributions. They are very much appreciated. Alex, would you like us to leave this? We'll leave this open for the rest of the day. So if people would like to keep adding, they can, and they can keep adding to the chat, and we'll keep moving it over. But I think what I'm going to do is sort of formally move over to the Q&A from the audience. And obviously, if there's questions that you have about this particular co-creation space, we can incorporate into the Jamboard too. But I'm going to open the floor then to sort of general Q&A as well. So I'll leave this up.
Much. Yeah, thanks, Susan, and thanks everyone for contributions. And I will also paste basically the spreadsheet for you to sign up if you wanted to be contacted later on.
Thanks so much, Alex. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing then because we're now just in the Q&A section. I don't see any new formal Q&A. So on the bottom of Zoom, there's a Q&A button that you can go and click and type a question that you have. If you prefer writing in the chat, that's also fine. Don't see any at the moment, but and unfortunately, I don't think that they're allowing for speaking. So if you do want to ask a question, that is the place to go. Just want to make sure the two that we already answered was one about becoming an ARA member, and the other one was about the problems we're having with the chat. So I think those have both been answered. Okay. So if anyone else has a further question, then please do put that in. We just go back to look at the board. I think there was just another one that came in just after we've sort of switched away, which that people and nature-centered physically planning to promote climate-proof infrastructure. I like that. I think we now have we've gone through all the others. Another one, capacity building.
Yeah, I just like to add that if any of our attendees would like to chip in and ask a question, or even would like to add something through voice, you may just raise your hand and we will allow you the unmuting option. So just in case.
Thank you. Oh, that's fantastic. That's much more helpful. And quicker. Well, while people are thinking, Sydney, you haven't been following the co-creation spaces as closely. Do you have any questions for me and Alex?
Oh gosh, putting me on the spot. Yes, you're right though. It's very interesting to also watch this, even though I'm part of the Secretariat team. But I'll let Erica come in first, seeing as she's got her hand up.
Fantastic. Hi, Erica.
Hi.
Please ask.
Hi, thank you so much. It was an interesting presentations and good to know about the Adaptation Resilience Alliance. I'm Erika Udas, working at ICIMOD. Particularly, we work at the Hindu Kush Himalayan region across the 8 countries from Afghanistan in the west to Myanmar in the east. And lots of things that you have presented are also the working areas of our priorities. Particularly like in terms of action research, we are very closely working with the universities and also with the local communities on this smallholder agriculture, water resources, climate change adaptations, and so on. So I think it is a great platform to know and collaborate to.
Thanks very much, Erica. Did we get okay? I think we might have got cut off just at the end, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. And fantastic that ICIMOD is doing so much overlapping work. And we have worked with ICIMOD on the climate risk journeys last year. I believe they were one of the organizations involved. I think this area of working more closely between researchers and communities and governments, it's becoming a bit more mainstream, I think. But we're very happy to be working with those who are pushing the frontiers on this and really making a big change. I think, Alex, you wanted to respond as well.
Yeah, I was going to acknowledge and recognize the contribution of ICIMOD to very important programs in this area, like Tomorrow Cities. I've been actually in contact with your contribution to that program, developing also co-production spaces for urban planning, which is very relevant. Your experience will be very good and inspiring for us too.
Great. Lisa has a question as well that she's put into the Q&A on community-led data collection. Can you elaborate more on how we can empower communities to collect data that is reliable? I think this was referring back to the video we had. One of the speakers was talking about that. I mean, I think there are some really interesting things that are happening on this. I mean, there's a citizen science side where, there's a lot of apps and things that are allowing people to enter data themselves, and the collection of data is made more simple. Still some massive challenges in terms of access to even mobile technology in some communities. So it really does depend. It's not a universal solution. It's often works better, I think, in the more urban areas. But often in the rural areas, we need to be still thinking quite creatively about how we make that work. But I think it's more the mindset of changing to say that data that is from the communities or information that they think is important, we need to be thinking how more cleverly about how we incorporate that, because clearly if they're tracking those things and they know about those things, it's important information to them. And if it's important to their context, there's probably a reason why, and researchers need to be shifting their thinking about, well, if this is an important aspect for communities, we need to incorporate this part into, because it might have other benefits besides just what we need for as researchers, but it might for the community be more transformational to have access to this. And I think there has been quite a few examples of that. I see, Jesse, your hand's up. Do you want to respond on this particular question? And then Alex, over to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I can touch on that. Were you done? Should I? Yeah. Okay, so actually, I wasn't going to respond to that question specifically, but it did make me reflect back to this mapping opportunities. But on that question, maybe just to finish what you were saying, Suzanne, is also to say that, from the Secretariat and the Alliance, Lisa, to your question, is that we don't necessarily drive these activities, kind of the activities on, like you're saying, how to empower the communities to collect data that's reliable. But it's really what we would do is to kind of flag these issues, bring members together to really have this discussion, and then hopefully facilitate that where they are, identifying these best ways of how to work on this. And as Suzanne said, there are some good examples of that out there already. But your question actually made me think of a question here I see on the board where somebody had added capacity building. And I'm not sure who that was, but if you don't want to say who you are, I guess the question here is really just to everyone, because capacity building is quite broad here, but within this themes, kind of urban resilience and capacity building as one of the sticky notes, I was just curious if anyone would like to elaborate a little bit on that, because I think the aspect of capacity building or capacity development is critical here, but also within this theme of urban resilience, it could go in many different ways, as Lisa's question was quite relevant. How could you empower local communities to collect data that's relevant in urban resilience, in this particular context? But of course, it goes to other contexts as well. So yeah, that was actually a question that I had, Suzanne.
Okay, great. No, I think that builds on nicely. So hopefully whoever put up the capacity building note would like to respond to you. But I think that what's interesting is a lot of these things, it's about, I think it's Erica who's put up her hand.
Yes.
Might be the person. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes, I think like capacity building, particularly in terms of building capacity of government officials, because they are very much responsible for planning their annual programs for implementation. And unless we bring the government on board, whatever kind of adaptation solutions or resilient solutions that we offer, we will not be able to take them at scale. Right. So at the first, I think it is more important because the government officials, even though they are like good policies, plans and regulations on having these urban planning, resilient planning, but those who are at the implementation level. So they are also like a different array of the structures of the government. So the local government particularly, who are responsible, who already knows their own context, their area, they actually are not so much aware about what the policies are and how they are going to implement that, right? That is at one level. And the other thing is also bringing the awareness part at the community level. And I think like these are the major things. And if we could really work with the private sectors in terms of scaling of these solutions, particularly, for example, like currently at EC Mode, we are also working on digital access of information to the smallholder farmers, where we are working on mobile apps and web-based applications for the municipalities to track what kind of crops they are growing, and also providing crop advisory services, market price information, as well as the weather information for decision making. So these kinds of informations, I think like if we could already embed these things into the government plans and processes, then we could be able to take them at scale.
Thank you very much.
That's really great response. Please go, Alex.
No, I was appreciating Erica. I think I can actually expand a little bit your answer, Suzanne, on data-led citizen or initiatives. I can actually put on the table one global initiative that is actually had a major impact in very different cities across the world. It's the Slum Dwellers International Initiative. It's very relevant because they have combined kind of a number of rites or kind of rituals, if you want, that has been quite effective. Number one is, on the one hand side, is this enumeration, basically, which is the data collection, data representation of themselves within the informal settlements as as Susan was actually mentioning before, is an ability of themselves to highlight what is important and to put themselves as a group of people that has a particularities, a specificities that are of their own. Local government can actually interact with them, but on the other hand as well, these saving communities, which makes them the ideal partner of local governments to resolve problems. So this cooperation, collaboration is actually part of their strategy. So if you wish, the data collection is combined with the capacity building that Erika is saying from the community to cooperate with local governments to resolve problems that sometimes escape both community and local government. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think Lisa's just added another point in here about an example from Malawi about the village civil protection committees and how that they are involved with the conducting the preliminary assessments once a disaster occurred, but it's done all manually. And so the technical part is still a bit of a challenge. I think that it's something very interesting to me because I recently was part of a workshop at the beginning of the year that was all about connecting technical app providers and people who are building databases and monitoring tools and all sorts of things on the technical side with sort of the problems that the adaptation community is actually experiencing. So I think there's a lot that could be done, and not that apps and tech can solve everything, but it can make access to information a lot easier, and the real-time aspects of not having to wait 4 months while everyone's doing converting manual data into something digital. Could be quite interesting to think about, maybe convening some conversations between these more technical providers and some of the challenges that we're working into in the adaptation communities. Erika, you've also posted another question here. When we are doing action research on adaptation solutions, we need to think on how we could integrate Indigenous knowledge to generate evidences and also bring the scaling aspects of these solutions or technologies. It's crucial to be mindful of what we offer and not to lead to maladaptation. Very much building, I think, on the same point here that, valuing Indigenous knowledge and making sure that we integrate it correctly and responsibly, and a lot of the dialogues we're having, seeing them as scientific knowledge and Indigenous knowledge on equal footings would be fantastic. At the same workshop from the beginning of the year that I mentioned with REDA, they were talking about, there was representatives from some of the Indigenous communities, and they were talking about the challenges that they're having, and a lot of it is also about acknowledging the value of the information that they hold and the knowledge that they already have. Some of the solutions that they actually have to place a bit more value on those, the learnings that they can share with others than is currently done, which I thought was quite it's a shift in mindset for researchers to really be thinking a bit differently about how we interact with Indigenous knowledge and the value that it brings, and especially the value of some of the solutions that they haven't been practicing for many, many years, and maybe hasn't been given equal weight in the solution space. Would anyone else like to respond to Erika as well?
Yes, an important point here is understanding knowledge not only something that actually flows, that may or may not reach certain fora, but think about the actual barrier for that influence to be related to the legitimacy or the credibility of a particular knowledge. So if actually, Indigenous knowledges are currently not influencing particular policy processes or planning processes, you can think of what are the legitimacies that are not being conferred, and how basically these co-creation spaces can support the creation or the fostering of that legitimacy. In my experience, if you bring basically sympathetic groups, sympathetic researchers that are using epistemologies, methods that are well recognized within policy processes, and these basically leverage and empower basically the importance of Indigenous knowledge, that is a way to change the power dynamics between the different groups.
Thanks so much, Alex. I think then, because we only have 10 minutes to go, I'm going to call the Q&A part of our session to an end. And Jesse, I'm going to hand over to you. I'll put a slide up momentarily.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. We didn't have a massive group today, but I think we had a really high quality group today. Thank you very much for all of the inputs on the mapping opportunities for the co-creation space. I can see, a couple more coming in, I think. And as Suzanne said, we'll leave that open for the rest of the day. What I wanted to do is, as you can see before you here, is basically try to, not summarize today's conversation, but really just highlight some of our expectations, some of our hopes for 2023. And to set up these 3 points you see before you, just to say that we'll continue to deliver these activities along the 3 ARA functions, which we have outlined in the theory of change. And those 3 functions are advocacy, research planning and cooperation, and resource mobilization and delivery. And these functions and the activities that you've heard about today and that you've contributed to now for the urban co-creation, these are all underpinned by the 6 principles that Suzanne highlighted at the very start. But with that, the first of the kind of core expectations, things that we really hope to see this year, is this continued work on the co-creation. And ultimately, we aim for the ARA members to be able to work together to co-create and to enhance activities that they're carrying out in the microgrants, in the tracking, learning, and sharing. But activities are looking at adaptation, research, and action, and we look to strengthen those through the networks and the partnerships. And ultimately, these are all really co-created. And now that we have the new website and the ARA members area providing an online platform for this, as well as all the learning and sharing activities, we really hope that members will be able to come together and start to strengthen and continue to co-create independently of whatever activities are actually being, say, more formally carried out by the ARA. But more specifically on this point, as highlighted at the very start, and you've heard it now a few times, by Suzanne, from Alex, and also from Sydney and myself, we're really aiming to develop these new action-oriented research programs in the 4 areas of nature-based solutions for equitable climate resilience, smallholder agriculture, LDC capacity for national adaptation actions, and as you've just contributed to here, urban resilience. But we'll also have our eyes and our ears open for other opportunities to launch new co-creation spaces focused on potentially new thematic areas. For example, health is an area that we have worked on and contributed to this NIHR call that I highlighted. So this is a potential new area that we could be looking forward to expanding in co-creation activities. And as I said, we're open to ideas and suggestions, and this is something that we'll be discussing with our members, and of course, paying very close attention to activities and things that are coming out of the adaptation space. The second area here, overall, as you can see, is supporting grassroots action research through the microgrants and beyond. As you've heard from Sydney and her presentation, for this round, we have 30 grants of £15,000 that are supporting local initiatives, hopefully some of these radical collaborations on research and action for adaptation. And then this time, with this strong component, core component of gender and social inclusion. But also these microgrants, going back to the point of co-creating, but also the idea of linking up with knowledge networks and partnerships, is we really hope that these grassroots activities will actually link to larger programs and larger projects. For example, the CLARE program that I mentioned before. We hope that some of these activities will just be the start of activities that can move on to continue the activities, or maybe even scale up some of these activities. And then the last point here that you see before you is about strengthening the footing of the Adaptation Research Alliance. I did say that we'll be finalizing the governance structure, which is quite internal and may seem a bit mundane, but really it's actually an important step for the Alliance to ensure smooth functioning of these 180 plus organizations. Another key aspect of strengthening this footing here is really the number and the diversity of funders. Currently, funding comes primarily from UKFCDO, with also, as I had mentioned before, ACRA, some core funding for the tracking, learning, and the website. But we really look to increase the diversity and the numbers, starting with this first funders roundtable that I mentioned before, and this we're looking for coming out in April. Important to the footing is actually strengthening the way that we work together. And this goes back to the point I made about the ARA members in the members area. but also, the idea of working together is not just the members themselves. It's actually this broader adaptation space or the adaptation community. One of the questions came up today is, is this only for members? And the members area is exclusively for members, but this Slack workspace that I mentioned in the co-creation activities, we very much intentionally designed this so it's not exclusive to members, because we recognize in co-creation activities, we want to pull on our members, of course, but also, most importantly, just ensuring that we are really reaching out to all those working in adaptation and resilience. And then with that, maybe the last point that I can just say here to close is that this really also goes to the importance, something that we want to continue to do, but it's to strengthen the membership base. And when I say by strengthening, I mean really bringing in more underrepresented groups and constituencies. So, Erica's point on integrating Indigenous knowledge, we recognize that Indigenous communities and Indigenous community groups are still underrepresented in our membership base. We'd like to increase that, as are small island developing states. So again, just a couple of areas, but we're also looking to strengthen the diversity of the membership itself. So with that, please do look at our website, www.adaptationresearchalliance.org. Please do reach out to us if you do have any questions. You can see the email on the screen in front of you. As I said, we definitely appreciate people joining, because the members are what want to really help drive this alliance, but we also want to engage with those who are not members. So please do reach out to us. Please do share your ideas. And thank you very much for your time and contributions today, your questions, and of course, the inputs that you put into the Urban Resilience co-creation space here with the mapping opportunities. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of the Gobeshona conference. Maybe Suzanne.
Thank you from our end too. I'd just like to request everyone, before we close, the panelists, if we could stop screening the sharing the screen and turn on all our videos for just a snap.
Thanks very much, everyone. And that brings our session to a close. It's been great to have you with us, and we look forward to seeing you on another call in another location. Maybe we'll see some of you at CBA or at Adaptation Futures. Goodbye.